Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on Finance 101 for Sustainability Coordinators. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Jana Cohen-Rosenthal. I'm the Director of Membership Programs at Second Nature. We are also joined by Pallavee Panchal, who is an intern with Second Nature, currently pursuing her MBA and Master's in Sustainable Development at Brandeis University, and has previous experience in finance. And lastly, we are very fortunate to have Thomas Sonnleitner, who is the Vice Chancellor of Administrative Services at the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh and is the Implementation Liaison for the ACU PCC. So I just wanted to give a brief overview of our objectives today and our agenda. So our objectives include understanding financial information utilized in making institution-wide decisions, how you can incorporate financial terms and analysis into implementing or writing or updating a climate action plan. And we also want to hear a business officer's perspective on collaborating on sustainability projects. This webinar is intended to be an overview of new terms and resources for sustainability coordinators, but is not intended to be in-depth. We encourage sustainability officers to reach out to others and utilize the resources we'll provide in the appendix of this webinar and following up. So in my personal experience as a sustainability coordinator, I found at times it was important to give a detailed financial plan, and often I didn't feel like I had the knowledge or resources to do that. And you know, it's important to show that there was an extensive return to gain approval, but it's not the only factor taken into account during the approval process. The plans were not always those with the best finances, but those that had a well-rounded focus that got selected. So we hope to also be able to communicate that throughout this webinar. So first we're going to hear from Second Nature about financial information and how you can incorporate it into your climate action plans. And then we'll hear from the Vice Chancellor about his experiences working in sustainability. And then we'll move into a Q&A session. Please note you can submit questions at any time via the webinar portal, and we'll be taking some of those questions at the end as well as some questions that were submitted ahead of time. And the webinar will be recorded and will be shared in the days following the webinar. So just a quick overview of Second Nature and the ACU PCC. Second Nature is a nonprofit based in Boston. We have a wonderful new annual report on our website in a new format, so you can check that out to learn more about our activities, including some exciting new directions for Second Nature, including a focus on resilience planning. And please look at our website for that new report. Our signature program is the American College and University President's Climate Commitment, or the ACU PCC. We have over 600 higher education institutions in the network. Signatories have committed to carbon neutrality, and in order to do so, they create structures for implementation, they measure their greenhouse gas inventories, create a climate action plan, and publicly report via our reporting system their progress toward goals. So our goal at Second Nature is to provide resources relevant to the needs of the network, the needs of signatories. In October, we'll be publishing an updated implementation guide and an in-depth focus on the financial aspect of climate action planning. We also like to provide other resources. Right now, there's a blog series about the White House's Clean Energy Plan, which has many implications for financial planning, and that's also on our website. So without further ado, Pallavee will give an overview of financial information and implementing it into the climate action plan. Here you go, Pallavee.
Thanks, Jana. Let's dive right into understanding why the finance is important. In order to get project approval from business officers, there are several key points that are first necessary to comprehend to gain this approval. Sustainability coordinators need to know how to add finances into their climate action plans or connect with the people on campus who can support this effort. They need to identify and understand specific important information in financial statements and 990s, which we will discuss later. They should have a rudimentary understanding of return on investment and how to calculate that on a basic level. They should be able to cite other successes from institutions that have utilized this information, had their projects approved, and the financial and environmental return was significant. Lastly, it is important to look at other resources outside of higher education that can provide guidance for understanding difficult concepts as they relate to nonprofits generally and higher education specifically. It's really important to step back and look at this in the larger context of sustainability work, because business officers vary in involvement. Business officers who are focused on building up the university's sustainability program may look at both the financial bottom line as well as the level of carbon saved or reduced from a project. As seen here, the Administrative Vice Chancellor of UC Irvine says that not to decarbonize energy has enormous consequences with real costs associated with it. But now let's take another perspective from a different business officer. On the other hand, we have the more common viewpoint from business officers who provided information that 5 years was the ideal time frame for a return on college and university investment. They were most willing to invest only if they were able to see the return within those 5 years. This means that it's important to count on the low-hanging fruits and focus on projects that will bring in profits short-term quickly and build trust for some longer-term, larger projects with very detailed cost analyses. As you can see from their thoughts and motivations, it's essential to provide as much financial information for the greatest chance of survival as it travels through operations and eventually lands with the business officer or equivalent. Not all of this information is necessary, but as much as can be added is helpful. First, it is important to provide an overview of large expenses for the project, projected savings, the return on investment, which we will go into a little later, and any large funding sources that have been secured. Next, we add in the current expenditures, projected expenses and savings, and the return on investment for 1, 3, and 5 years. Our next step is to add funding goals and procurement methods, the budgets for each project, and monitoring and evaluation for the projects, as well as the individual project schedules. This is the best place to include challenges and constraints identified, institutional procedures, and designated responsibilities. From here, we add in long-term financial and funding goals for the projects. Next, we move on to the analysis of the short and long-term financial returns of each of the projects, along with the reassessment of financial goals and objectives. This provides a solid understanding of the value add. Lastly, it is important to include a charted return on investment throughout the project, the profits that will occur due to the project's inception, and a snapshot of expenses that result from the plan. Though all of these financials are important, there are many considerations which weigh in for project selection decision-making. These can include project life cycle costs and benefits, including the consideration of maintenance costs and savings, the impacts on safety, health, comfort, or productivity, as well as capital improvement. In order to gather this information, we can look at the financial statements. Though it is not necessary to understand everything in these documents, it is crucial to know who to ask and how to ask it to gather the best information to elevate the climate action plan. When looking at these documents that can either be requested from the administration and could possibly be available through the institution's website as well, there will be 3 key documents to analyze. If you are unaware of where to find them, please ask your business officer or equivalent where they are on the website or if they're in the university archives. The balance sheet, which provides a snapshot of assets, liabilities, and net assets on a particular day. The statement of cash flows, which summarizes the sources and uses of cash and reconciles that cash from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. Lastly, the income statement is a summary of all the revenues and expenses of the institution during an accounting period. From here, we move on to understanding the 990. This is a form that must be filled out by organizations that are tax exempt from Income Tax Section 501c3. Sustainability officers do not fill out this form. It is filled out by the business officer, but it is public information that you can find and compare yourself to other institutions. To request this information, please ask your business officer where it is located. The public 990 information may be up to 2 years old, so they may have more updated information for you. The 3 most important things to note on a 990, which is a very lengthy form, are the investments, which indicates the current level of endowment of the institution, the section on loans, which provides a snapshot of the long-term debt, owed by the institution and can negatively affect decisions about high expense, low profit projects. And lastly, the net profit margin is a good indicator of the financial health of the institution. The reason you are asking for this information is to understand how different projects can be funded. You are not expected to understand the funding completely, but by looking at these forms, you can see as an example if the long-term debt is very high, then the university most probably cannot fund these projects with debt financing. Similarly, if the endowment is decreasing dramatically over a few years, then the project most probably will not be financed through the endowment. It is important to note that funding can come from various sources, including campus budgets, borrowing, incentives from governments and utilities, and grants from the foundations. This can be discussed in further detail with the business officer. It is very important to build a good relationship with your business officer and maintain their involvement when building a climate action plan. Now we get to one of the most important indicators of success for a business officer, the ROI, or return on investment, which is a metric used to measure the rate of return of money invested in a project. It is used as an indicator to compare different projects. So how does one utilize this simple equation? Net profits is just expenses subtracted from the revenues. Both of these items can be calculated by looking at the money that will come in as a result of the project and the expenses that are associated with the project only. This includes human resources dedicated to the project as well. The investment will be calculated by finding all of the costs and expenses associated with the project. With this information plugged into the shown formula, the ROI can be calculated for each individual project. This can also be completed in conjunction with the business officer. If you are unsure of where to find any of this information, please find someone in the finance department that you can build a good relationship with to discuss where to locate this information. In the implementation guide, as well as the more in-depth Financial 101 guide coming out this October, there is a very thorough explanation and analysis of using the ROI and other cost analyses. So why is ROI so important and what does it tell us? Most business officers will be looking for the projected savings and a potential for profit within 5 years, as we saw earlier. To create and implement a successful climate action plan, there must be short-term wins along with future planning. For business officers, sustainability doesn't just mean reaching carbon neutrality. It means keeping expenses at a minimum, maintaining the endowment, and spending only when returns will provide profits and/or savings.
Thank you, Pallavee, for that wonderful overview about financial analysis. Since it is so important, we are collaborating to provide resources and help with planning and implementation of your climate action plans once you create them to find more financial returns. So GRITS, or the Green Revolving Investment Tracking System, was created by the Sustainable Endowments Institute, or SEI. It provides detailed analysis of campus projects financed through a green revolving fund or other methods. You can track your savings and costs, as well as compare yourself to a library of other projects. We have supported a pilot with 20, mostly minority-serving institutions to better see how the tool helps meet the commitments. So far, the results have been positive, and we will release more information. Any signatory, any institution can sign up now with GRITS, but we hope to detail more how it connects clearly to the ACUPCC. Similarly, Confluence provides a platform for modeling, planning, and visualizing energy and carbon management solutions. Many different financial scenarios could be analyzed. We have also engaged with a pilot with 15 schools. They have been excited to use a tool specifically designed to support planning and assessing their strategies to meet their commitment. Now we are excited to introduce Vice Chancellor Sonnleitner to talk about his experiences at UW-Oshkosh. So Tom, please start.
Okay, thank you, and I'm glad to be part of the webinar, and I appreciate the invitation to talk about my experiences here at the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh. I know many of you on the line might wonder why a vice chancellor is involved at this level in this kind of a discussion, but at our campus, it was important to make sure that we took this this journey seriously. In other words, we want to make sure that it's supported at the highest levels. So as the Chancellor and the Vice Chancellors, we have 4 here on our campus, talk about priorities and importance of issues here at our institution, it was important that this be one of the key parts of it. So it is part of our strategic plan. Given that, we identified hired a sustainability director and identified about 20 individuals to be on a sustainability advisory council that advises the director as well as myself and the provost. So this sustainability director has a co-report to the CFO, that's my position, as well as the provost. That way we have a foot in both camps and we can balance the approach. The picture you see in front of you is one of our newest buildings called Sage Hall. It's the home of the College of Business and some Letters and Science departments, and you see those crazy looking flowers in the front. Those are actually solar flares. The building itself produces about 10% of the energy that it uses. So we have installations of photovoltaic, solar thermal, a green roof, and these flares. And so it's an integral part of gaining the LEED Gold certification for that building. The goal here on campus is to have any new buildings put in place, as well as those that are repurposed to come to that standard. We can't always be successful there, but that's certainly our goal. A couple of issues that I'd like to speak to start with would be how do we collaborate here on this campus in terms of with our sustainability director, the council, and the budget and planning staff, for example. So as I mentioned, the director reports directly to myself and the provost. Our facilities director is part of the sustainability advisory panel and attends the biweekly sustainability advisory group meetings. That group includes faculty, students, and staff across campus. So we have a broad inclusion here. The sustainability director also attends facility remodeling and planning meetings. So any new building, any remodeled building, a major project, that sustainability director is there so that we can focus on making sure we build those standards. Oftentimes, as you know, the issue is, well, we can't afford to do this, or we can't afford to do this kind of a change. And I can, from my chair, I can put the pressure on the group that reports from both ends, the facilities director as well as the sustainability director, to make that happen. Now, not all of in this state, not all of the plans and projects are controlled totally by us. So there's a state of Wisconsin involvement here so we aren't always successful, but we can make sure that it's in our number one priority. We and we also include our sustainability director in the grounds and master planning process. So fully involving the sustainability director is so important here to make sure that we're all following that path. The visibility of that position with our faculty, with both sides of the campus, both the teaching side as well as the facility side is really important. We're kind of focused here on developing business plans. I think, how does finance play a role? And in this case, each project needs to have a business plan. As you develop a proposal, a thought about how you want to infuse sustainability into, could be into the curriculum, it could be into a change in a building, it could be any type of a project. It needs to have an ROI with it, as Jana mentioned. That's what sells. And it's not just about the financial performance of that project, but it's also about the other benefits to the campus. So they're not all financial, but they can be part of that ROI. That sells as well. and it's easy then to carry the message. So I'll just give you an example of a project that we have here on campus, which is we're doing a number of biodigesters around biomass and actually a large farm. So there's 9,500 cows involved in a project we have. So there's a lot of poop that we have to process and create methane from, and et cetera. But the project that we have on campus, directly on campus, is what we call a dry fermentation anaerobic digestion process. And the way we finance those types of projects is to have our foundation fund them. In other words, they're the front for it. So we ask the foundation to enter into an arrangement with a local bank or a national bank, for that matter, and to put a mortgage on the project. There has to be a strong business plan with it, or the bank won't buy into it. There has to be a cash flow with it as well. And most projects won't cash flow in the first couple of years, 2 or 3 years, sometimes 4 years before they actually get in the black. And so this particular project we're talking about required an arrangement with a local utility, power purchase agreement, to sell electricity that was generated from the methane as it was burned in a combined heat and power generator. And so that has been going very well for the last 3 years, just short of a little over 3 years. At this point, we're saying we need to make sure that this thing fully cash flows, and it certainly won't do that in the United States on electricity sales alone. So we figured out a way to process the digestate. In other words, the stuff that's left over. This is materials from yard waste and food waste. And so we created a product called Titan Gold. And it basically is Titan happens to be our mascot, if there is such a thing. But anyway, we haven't quite figured out what a Titan is yet, but that's our name on it. And in essence, we're marketing that today and selling it at $15 a bag. We figured out how to make this thing pay. It took us, again, 3+ years to do it, but it will be in the black this spring, this upcoming spring. So you may have a great idea. A number of your colleagues may, the council, however you're arranged or organized at your campus. And it's important to bring that ROI through the finance department. As Janice said, find a friend in the finance department, preferably the vice chancellor, who can carry that torch for you, carry that idea through to sell it so that you can take a chance on implementing it. It's really worked here from University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh perspective. The impact of projects like this is far-reaching. So not only do we have a digester on campus, but we also have created something we call Experimental Research and Innovation Lab, called the ERIC Lab. It is now one of 10 certified labs in the country that can measure methane and certify components of the various products that are running through it. So what does that mean? Why is that important? It's important because it's now providing a teaching tool for our students. It provides an opportunity for intellectual property for our faculty, student-faculty projects, and very important part of I think a sustainability plan is it's about certainly making us more energy efficient and ridding ourselves of greenhouse gases, but there are lots of other opportunities that we're trying to teach our students to go out, provide our students with the tools to go out into the working world, into companies, and to do the same thing there that they've learned here. That's been a wonderful opportunity for our students, and so they're actually the ones who created this product I mentioned earlier called Titan Gold. It was a group of students and 2 faculty members who researched it processed it and reprocessed and came up with something that was saleable. As a result of that, we've recently been recognized here as the #3 greenest institution in the country through the Sierra Club. We all know that these rankings come with you can take those with a grain of salt, but in this particular world, it's really important. The two schools ahead of us are both California schools. They have a mandate. They always have had out there to deal with the emissions, etc., all the way from automobiles to any other product. When you come into a place like Wisconsin and other parts of the country, you don't have those same mandates. So being recognized for being a green school is really important to us, and it helps us with recruiting students. It helps us in carrying out that mission that we have as part of our strategic plan. But I'd stop there at this point. I certainly could share other thoughts and ideas, but I'd defer to the audience for any questions you might have or ways that I can expand on what I just mentioned.
Great. Thank you so much, Tom. That was a wonderful overview of your work, and congratulations on your rankings and awards. One thing that I wanted to talk about first was your role at a public institution. We got a question from someone. How do public universities determine the financial viability of a project, and how that might be different from a private school or a private institution?
I really don't think it's any different. At least here at Oshkosh, what we've tried to do is to act like a private institution in the sense that we've used our foundation to front major projects. So if you're going into a performance contract type approach for changing controls to get better efficiency, I think the statistics show that roughly 1/3 of your emissions you can reduce through efficiencies by installing different ways of managing your lights and other products. The other 2/3 of it require serious investment in new ideas and projects. But certainly the difference is having the commitment. There is really no difference, in my opinion, that it doesn't matter whether you're public or private. It's having the endowment available to spend if it's there, earmarking part of it in a private institution, or using your foundation in a public institution to do the same thing.
Thank you very much. One thing we wanted to point out was the 990s are available only for private institutions, and public institutions might have financial information in a different way, depending on their state and other laws and rules. But also, iPad's website also has some information about financial terms, and we'll include that as part of our resources. Another question that we got from someone is the following, and Tom, maybe you can take this as well. How do I get funding for projects if our utility budget is chronically underfunded and in the red?
Right, and a great question. I think that by creating a performance contract, by coming up with an idea to make some change in a building, for example, that is structured. The way performance contracts work is we just signed our 5th one with a company called Johnson Controls, which I'm sure many of you have heard of, and it has to do with changing out some hoods in our science building. And what we do is identify the work that needs to be done. Say it's a $2 million project. The idea behind a performance contract is that it will not only pay for the cost of the construction, but will provide a savings beyond that. So generally speaking, it's a 10 to 20% savings in energy beyond the cost of the project. So designing a project through your facilities department and showing that you're actually going to reduce your utilities bill by not only the $2 million, the cost of the project over time. So they're generally 7 to 8 years of payback time. So divide by 7 or 8 and plus that 10% utility savings on top of it. And so the ROI is there if you approach it from that perspective.
So we actually have another question about ROI. So your digester project, what was the original ROI on the biodigester project, and how did the business plan get approved and funded before knowing about the potential of creating the Titan Gold product, which sounds like it sped up the ROI?
Right. The understanding, of course, going in is that they won't pay, you can't recover your costs in the first 2 or 3 years of a project like this. So it's a 10-year project, a 10-year plan. The investment was roughly $5 million. However, we were able to receive some money from the federal government through an appropriation through a group called the Focus on Energy here in Wisconsin. Every state has something like that. And also another grant that about $2 million worth. So the cost of the project was $3 million. How do you generate enough money over the course of time to over that 10 years to not only pay for the project but to provide money back, in this case, to the foundation so they can put out scholarship money or invest in other projects. And so there's some trust required there, but you have to have the strong lay out a strong plan and make sure that you can support that. So, and monitoring it along the way. So a contract with a utility company saying we will pay you X amount for each kilowatt hour that you produce, and with the promise that you're going to develop another revenue stream from the sale of, in this case, Titan Gold. And other opportunities crop up as well along the way. But in the meantime, you can also generate money by, in this case, since it's owned by the foundation, to rent it to the university as a laboratory. So instead of building a lab, spending money to build another lab building on campus, this will is a replacement for that. So again, having that strong 10-year layout of how your cash is going to flow and working it that way.
Wonderful. One question we got was about how you find external sources of funding for projects, and from our perspective at Second Nature and my own experience, there are many different ways to do that, and we have a lot of information on our website about different vehicles, including power purchase agreements for renewable energy projects, energy savings accounts, and utility incentives. And we wanted to point people to the Desire database, which is a good place to look for incentives on renewables and energy efficiency in your area. That's a website online. Tom, do you have any other places you would look for external sources of funding or any experience with these different type of financing options?
Well, certainly, I think in your list you probably had things like the Focus on Energy, where you get a rebate for energy saving ideas, but also your department's Office of Energy at the state level. They're always looking for good projects, so there's always an opportunity. These things take time and effort to write. Any grant takes time, and you're maybe not always successful at the first try, but that certainly has been a source for us as well. In one of our biodigesters, we got $125,000 for that. So it's not a single source, but it's multiple. You have businesses in the area who are committed to this focus as well. If you're in a private institution, you may find a donor who has that interest. There are companies that you can partner with. In this case, Johnson Controls. They will help you get to that point as a partner. So in multiple ways, it's really pulling on everybody to identify it.
That's wonderful. Pallavee, when you were talking, you talked a little bit about low-hanging fruit and ROIs. Someone asked us how you can make a case for large investments. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Sure, Jana. So as I had mentioned, for larger investments, it's harder to be able to approach a business officer if you don't have that relationship, if you haven't already brought up you know, smaller projects, or if you haven't proven that you can build a case for those initially. So if you want to be able to get funding for longer term or larger projects, you have to be able to like kind of build up to it. So build the momentum, get the smaller projects first, and like kind of show that you've already like approached the entire sustainability effort on campus. So you've gotten all of the smaller projects and everything that's very quick, that has a very quick payback, and you can show those as an example and then move on to larger projects from there. So you start from the short-term projects to medium term, and then you look at long-term, and you also see how they work in conjunction with each other. So to be able to see smaller projects, if they are able to be paired with longer-term projects, and so that whenever one is paying out, you have the other one being able to take more costs, so that it turns out to be like either net positive or just the impact isn't as much.
Wonderful. So, you know, the intention of this webinar was to give an overview of some financial terms for sustainability coordinators. You know, we keep on emphasizing that you need to build a good relationship with someone like Tom or with your business officer. If as a sustainability coordinator you want to give more information to your business officer, Tom, do you have any places that you would recommend that sustainability coordinators send their business officers? Any resources? Anything that you think is a good direction to point people in?
You're talking about for the sustainability coordinator to who to connect with, how to share that information. Is that the point?
Yeah, for the business officer, you know, beyond, you know, your own project, otherwise, but, you know, where should the business officer, I guess, go for information?
Well, in terms of identifying the type of project, is making sure that the business office has a representative on that council, in our case, the Sustainability Advisory Council. So we have procurement is an area that we are focusing on right now. And IT, purchase of computers, how do we do that in a green way? How do we benefit, how do we reduce that greenhouse gas through purchases like that? So having the policies in place for people to follow. And then, of course, it's a compliance kind of thing, and you know, in a good way, not in a bad way. So it's how do you make sure that we're buying recycled paper, for example, throughout the campus. Since we all have P cards, people can go out and buy off of a list. In a state institution, I'm pretty sure it's the same in a private. So how do you hold people's feet to the fire to follow that policy? And I think that strong connection with our procurement group and the Sustainability Council to make sure the word gets out, communications, etc. So writing a policy requires the people in my zone to work directly with the sustainability director, as well as people in the field, to say, hey, what works for you? How can we make this happen? Same with computers. How do we buy the right kinds of computers that beat those standards, as well as provide the right kind of access?
That's great. As well, I think Second Nature has partnered in the past with Nakubo, which has a lot of great resources for business officers.
Right.
And, you know, we are always looking for more tools and resources to share with the network. So if anyone has anything actually that they think we should let everyone know about, feel free to also submit that as in the question portal.
Just a follow-up on that, I guess I didn't mention that I'm a member of the Sustainability Advisory Panel at Nakubo, so there are about a dozen of us or so that represent institutions across the country, and Wendell Brazzi, whose picture you saw in your presentation earlier, is also a member of that, and we are trying to educate our business officers to understand it's their responsibility to ensure that in terms of renewable energy, that we have as we use utilities, coal and natural gas and others, that it's our responsibility to figure out how to have a backup plan. You know, if those resources aren't available through the grid, what are we going to do about it 10 years from now? Is that an issue for our finance statements, things like that? So we have a broad index of issues that we discuss, and we're always looking for input, ideas, things that we should discuss to make sure that they're brought to the forefront. So thanks for mentioning Akubo.
No problem. That's the National Association of College and University Business Officers.
That's right.
And yeah, and also they have a lot of information for implementing sustainability projects as well. As I've seen some good resources for planning, more of the planning perspective from SCUP, to send people in that world over to the Society for College and University Planning. So there's a lot of great resources for sustainability that's not just focused on the sustainability coordinator if you're trying to bring a more diverse group of people into your work and to planning. The question actually we just got from someone was, for smaller projects, are you physically metering consumption of energy before and after? And I assume part of that question is there's often some costs in installing meters and analyzing that data. So, Tom, in your projects, how do you use energy metering and data?
Well, we just signed on for another performance contract with our partner, and part of it is dealing with the metering to make sure we can measure what's going on, and that really should be part of the project cost, part of the ROI, if you will. And so as you try to sell a project to the campus, to your facilities group, or to the finance group, is making sure that it's in there. And if in fact it's superfluous to that, it should be, those meters should be in any way. You can sell that as part of the infrastructure that needs to be invested in by the campus. So we all want to make sure that we can measure the output or the use throughout the campus, but would include it in the project and try to sell it that way.
Wonderful. We just got a question about tax levy funds, which is something I'm not that familiar with. It says, in reference to procurement and partnering with the business officer to ensure that green purchasing is taking place, that tends to work for tax levy funds, but not non-tax levy. Can you comment on that or have any experience with that? Tom, are you able to speak to tax levy funds?
In terms of tax levy, in other words, that you're levying a tax on someone for not using it. I think that's the point of the question, right? You can certainly, if we require that the institution uses green products, and whether it's in facilities for cleaning or whether it's paper or other kinds of things, what's the penalty if you don't? Is the point, I guess. You withhold funds from the department. You want to be that compliant. I think you're trying to educate people to get to a point, and you're never going to have perfection in anything, but you can certainly continue to go down the path, and eventually people will move into that pattern. But we haven't used anything like a tax levy fund here.
There's a lot of really interesting different financing methods to encourage climate action planning. I recently read about a program at Microsoft and some other companies where they have an internal price on carbon for different departments, and every department has to plan that way. I'm not familiar with any higher education institutions who are doing that. Maybe others in the audience are, or yourself, but I thought that was maybe another idea for a webinar, is to follow up on that method.
Right.
So we have another question. So we've been talking about different financial vehicles, but at the heart of a lot of this stuff is relationship building and having a good relationship with the CFO and with sustainability. In the experience of writing a climate action plan can come, in many different ways. We have lots of different examples across the network, and so we got a question about how you can build a good relationship with your CFO. And we spoke to it a little bit, by creating projects that have some short-term wins, some long-term returns. But I think that that answer to that question depends on your campus and your campus culture. And something we've talked a lot about in the past at Second Nature is making sustainability part of your mission. So you're not convincing someone to do sustainability work because of your reasons, but you're doing it for reasons or the mission of the school. So if the mission of the school is right now very focused on improving educational access, sustainability projects and programs would speak to that mission. We're not forcing people necessarily to do projects for our reasons, or we're really trying to find mutual gains and work together. So that's some experience we've seen across the network, and in my experience. Tom, what are some feedback you might have for how to build a good relationship with the CFO?
Well, I think it's education of people in the finance area. So you have, as we in the finance area try to educate people about balance sheets and cash flow statements and things like that, you have to speak their language. So as we say here, you have to take the CPA out of the statement somehow. So you have to do it in plain English. So in terms of the tenets of sustainability, is sustainability directors and folks in that field have a full understanding of the meaning of it and the impact of not doing something, but I'm not sure that resonates as well with people who aren't in the field. So involving people in meetings, inviting groups, having webinars that should have lunch type setting meetings, other ways of communicating and keeping it up, not just do it once or twice, but making sure everybody's involved in it. So I think that's what's worked here, having inclusive groups, and then that message comes back and people start supporting it across the campus in a larger way. So it doesn't become what you'd call a tree hugger kind of approach. It becomes a natural, logical way to do things. It makes sense.
Wonderful, that's great. So we had a question about talking in the language. If we knew of where you can get life cycle cost analysis spreadsheets, or where you can calculate your net present value. Pallavee, can you talk a little bit to that?
Sure, Jana. So in October, we're actually releasing the larger implementation guide and also a more in-depth analysis of the financial ratios and calculations that you can utilize while creating your climate action plan. So that goes into understanding the net present value, the internal rate of return, the return on investment, all those sorts of different calculations that you can provide. So like Tom just said, you can speak that language, and you can bring something to the table that, may not be expected of you at first, but if they understand that you know this kind of language and you're able to provide that information, it will make that relationship a lot easier to bridge.
Yeah, I mean, at the same time, I think that no one has to feel overwhelmed that they have to be completely familiar with all these terms. I think it's more being aware that you can include more than simple payback, and that you can include escalation in prices and create different scenarios. Maybe create scenario, work with your planning office to create scenarios for growth or scenarios for decreased growth, and being able to use those different terms, but not necessarily having to do it all on your own.
I guess, Jenna, one thing I'd like to add would be that we recently held a sustainability summit on campus and invited the campus in. And so we were trying to get folks across campus that not the normal suspects. In other words, we want people to come in who had an interest in it or who were trying to find out more about it. We had 120 attendees, and it was really surprising to me the kinds of things that came out in that process. So our sustainability director and another person we have here on campus who is focused on the renewable energy side were the co-chairs or co-leaders of it, brought in a facilitator to make sure that it wasn't all kind of an in-house approach, and it really worked well. So the outcome of that is going to help us move forward. It also helped with the understanding and the ideas, what they mean and how they can impact us here. But I thought that was a great tool.
Wonderful. So I have two clarifications. So I heard from an audience member that they know some schools are putting a climate tax, you could call it, or a climate carbon cost on air travel. So so anytime someone on campus travels, they need to pay to fund. That's an interesting idea. I don't know, that definitely goes into some relationship building and improving, the point of your carbon neutrality plan, and maybe connecting that carbon tax to clear ways that you're improving people's experience on campus. Better buildings, bike projects, other things that feel like a benefit besides a tax. But it was great to know about. So actually, and we also have a clarification about tax levy. So the tax levy is money budgeted by the state. Non-tax levy money is soft money, like that comes from a donation or college-generated income. So, so I guess the question is, how do you work on money that is being budgeted in the state that you can't change as much? Do you have any experience with that, Tom?
How we have money that's budgeted by the state that, not sure I understand the question.
Yeah, it seems like maybe at some schools the procurement office has certain money that's budgeted by the state and they can't change it, but perhaps that's not your experience.
Oh, I don't think so.
Yeah.
We certainly have guidelines and rules about how we can spend our money in terms of state contracts, et cetera, but nothing that punitive, I guess. Again, the other thing I'd say about taxing and the levies is that you get further with sugar than vinegar, and it's just like parking, which is also in my zone. Compliance is important, but if you penalize people, if you play the hard role here and penalize people for every violation, your culture on your campus gets destroyed. If you penalize the people who continue to violate, that's one thing, but not just the everyday violation that occurs. And the same would hold true with travel. I've heard about certainly the air travel tax, the carbon tax charge, but again, it's education to that end, and you're never going to have perfect compliance on it. I'm just not a believer in the levy kind of approach, personally.
So one way, I guess, of giving people is giving a department or a financial return through something like a green revolving loan fund. Have you tried that method on your campus?
Sure. So provide a benefit for those people who actually comply versus those that don't receive it. So sure, that's something. We have a real strong incentive type program here, not necessarily around air travel and things like that, but we use it in many ways. But that really works. Incentives versus penalties. Great.
Yeah, and I think that there's more information about green revolving loan funds on the SEI website and how you can use them with grants or on your own as well. Mm-hmm. We're going to take one more question for Tom, and then we're going to wrap up. So, Tom, we heard from people about demonstrating ROI beyond basic years and costs. Can you give some example of ROI for projects that are beyond that cost that you found to be particularly effective on your campus?
So, for instance, some of the benefits in an ROI that aren't necessarily financial, is that the gist?
Yes.
So I think that the example I used on our new biomass testing lab, it's really more than a biomass testing lab. It started out as a water testing lab here in Wisconsin. We have a lot of beaches, and so we were worried about the quality of the water, and so many communities ask us to come up with, we take our students to do the work there, but receive a number of federal grants. One of our professors did anyway to do that sort of work. So we expanded that lab to so we could involve more students, more faculty, more of a teaching lab approach, as well as a revenue producing lab. So I think in this case, the benefits, rather than having to go out and build a laboratory building, the projects that we've used here, there's some, I could pay rent to this to make it come out evenly, make the finances come out. I could pay rent to this project from the campus perspective, but we choose here to say that's a benefit that's worth $50,000 or whatever number you want to use, and that becomes part of an ROI. The inclusion in the curriculum as a result of the work we've done here is another sometimes not measurable benefit that's really accrued from that process.
Thank you so much. So I want to thank Tom for joining us and for giving a wonderful perspective and experience on your activities at Oshkosh. I also want to thank the audience for your great questions. There were some really great questions. And we are available if you want to ask us anything else. You can send an email to me at jcohenrosenthal@secondnature.org. You can also look on our website at secondnature.org for the resources we mentioned, and stay tuned for release in October of some more resources. This specific recording and the slides will be emailed in the next few days. You can look at the reporting system and find reports that detail the cost savings from being an ACPCC signatory. So, for instance, you can look at Tom's reports and see what they've reported as their cost savings there. That's at rs.acpcc.org. So again, in the appendix to this PowerPoint, we'll have some more resources for people to click on and look at. So thank you all for joining us. I hope that the new semester goes well, and please be in touch with any questions or suggestions you have. And good luck implementing your climate action plans with more detailed financial analysis.